Welcome back. Okay, we're going to do another autumn pick by request again. You guys have been so fabulous with this. It makes my job so much easier because I know what to go over with you. Okay, so we're just going to go over this and pick out one photo to work on. It doesn't really matter which one. And then we'll take one into Photoshop and finish off in there. Okay, so I think we'll just double check that these are in focus. Yep, they are. Okay, and we'll go to the other one as well. Let's see which one's better. Now I always check the focus. Okay, it's all good. So, what's her eyes doing? I might just check the other one again. I think her eyes are better in this one. Okay, and we'll get started. First things first is I do want to make sure that my exposure is on. So in this one, the exposure is not so great. So I'm going to raise the exposure a little. Let's try quite a big exposure raise to begin with. Okay, now I'm going to warm the temperature up as well, obviously. So I'm going to go with about a 6, well, let's just go there, 648. And the tint, we might just leave that as is. Highlights. I'm not going to go down all the way this time. The reason being is I still want some of the areas that are highlights to stay in focus, so to speak. So that, okay, and whites. We only want a little bit down on that one. All right. So we've got highlights -57, whites -7. And let's go down to the hue, saturation and luminance, and I don't think we need to change any of those. However, what I would like to do, well actually let's illuminate the oranges just to have a look. And the reds. Okay, and the yellows. Okay, so that actually makes the background messier. So let's go the opposite of. Now if you want the background to be cleaner, you could go that, but it also darkens their skin tones. So I'm going to leave it this time. I think it's nice as it is, but consider that when you're doing it yourself. If you want the background messier, then you could illuminate so that it goes the other way, and then as lighter. And if you want it to be cleaner, fuller, darker, then you make it luminance go the opposite direction. Make it darker. Okay, so now I think I'd like the shadows to be a little warmer. So I'm going to go into the shadows. Actually, let's just change it here. And put in a little bit of warmth. Okay, so I've made the hue, you can make it anything you want, but I've just made it warmer. Put that on about 47. And the saturation, we could saturate that quite nicely. So we'll put that on about 35. So now all I need to do is add in a little bit of sharpening, and I'm going to do a large one this time because I'm going to try and do as much as I can in Lightroom as I normally try and do nowadays. And if I've done such a high sharpening, I do want my noise reduction. Also, this is a mum and baby. So that's actually softened her skin quite nicely, and because the background is blurry, that's okay. I'm actually quite happy for that to be as it is. Alright, so now I'm going to add in a vignette, but this time I want to be fairly careful. I don't really want to go too dark because they've already got a bit of a vignette going on there anyway. So I'm going to just make it -7. Alright. So if we have a look at the before and after, we've actually warmed that scene up quite considerably. Now if you have an autumn shot that isn't quite as underexposed, and if you put, this is on auto white balance by the way, so if you've got a warmer white balance, then you wouldn't need to go quite as yellow obviously. So you'd obviously need to do it to taste. There we go. Actually I'm going to bring that down just a touch now. So I'm going to go back and make the temperature 5333. Now I actually really enjoy the circle feel of this. However, it's too far away over here. So in Photoshop, I'm already planning to take this off and just move it in and then crop it off. Okay. Alright. So, I think we'll take that into Photoshop. There are other things that you could do. For example, you could do the radial filter. I'll show you what you could do. So, if you want a downward light, a radial filter, which you have seen me use before if you've been watching all the videos along. Okay. And I'm going to press inverse mask. Okay. Double click to bring that back to normal. And all I'm going to do is simply raise the exposure. And as you can see, that's brought nice downward light on them there. Press enter. Now you can do that over and over and over again if you want. Okay. Obviously done 2 there accidentally. What's this one? Yep, I have. I'll delete that. There we go. That's much better. That made it blue. Okay, so I think we'll just take that into Photoshop and we'll continue on in there. Okay, so straight away, I want to mention this area here. I love the beautiful circle effect of this. However, I wish that it was a little bit over. So straight away, I'm going to grab that, Control-C, Control-V to cut and paste it, and I'm just going to move it over a little. Now, everything's a little bit closer in. Of course, this is where the line finishes, so I'm just going to grab my crop tool and crop that in. And now they're more centered as well, which is helpful. In fact, let's just grab that a little bit more. Now I'm going to put a mask on that and mask that off on her foot and the shirt. And I'll just bring this back a little more. Okay, the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to go for the actual center. Now I'm just cropping to how it falls at the moment. So I think I actually want it there. Alright. And I think that's much more aesthetically pleasing. But it really is to taste, isn't it? So I'm just going to... Oop, I'm not going to do that. Grab the mask. And then brush it off here. Okay, my opacity's at 55, so I'll just increase that back up. Alright, so now to figure out what to do with this. Now that I've got a base, Control J to duplicate the background layer. And then I'll grab both of them by pressing Shift at the same time. Control Alt E to make a merge layer, and then I can just put those in a group. So I've got them there for later, and we'll just call that background. Okay. And that way I can go back to it if I wish. Control J to have my working layer again. Okay, so really, what do we want to do here is simply enhance the feel, I guess. And I'm going to go for a vintagey, just very slightly feel, just for a different change in the effect. Now what I'm going to do is grab a color balance, and I am going to actually pull down shadows, and I'm going for a different feel in the shadows. Now by dragging this across, you actually can put blue in the shadows. You can also put anything you want in the shadows. I guess it's the same as doing it in Lightroom. It's just another way of doing it here. Okay. So I've made that slightly more autumny. So now what I'd like to do is add a solid colour, and I'm going to go for the same kind of feel, a burnt brown. Okay, now I actually quite like what that's done to haze the effect over the top. However, I might just grab all the layers, Control Alt E and Control J to duplicate the layer again. And what I'd like to do is do an auto contrast. And I quite like how she's come back out again as well as the baby there. So I'm going to make that a mask, Control I to invert it. And a white brush. And I'm just going to keep that as a fluffy edge. So my hardness is 0, and I'm just going to paint that back. Now, you probably might want to do this a little neater than what I'm doing, but just to give you an idea. Okay. Now, I've been careful to leave off the baby's skin tones there. And now I'm just going to reduce the opacity and now work on that carefully. Okay, so now I've brought them out of the background a little. What I can do is now raise the size of the brush just a touch and see if I can't just paint around them back a little. Okay, now if you have a look at the mask here, you can see that I've actually just brought attention to them and hazed the rest out a little. Okay, now I'm going to add a saturation layer and I'm going to saturate those edges up, but not the mum and baby. So I'll grab a black mask, black brush on a white mask, up the opacity of that, grab their little skin tones, the little red toes. Okay, now we'll need of course to work on the baby. The baby's gone a little bit red, but I'm enjoying the colours that have come out in the rest of the image. Alright, so now I'm going to add a curves, raise the curves a little, just a touch. So I've raised the curves just a touch, and at this point I want to zoom in and have a look at this little baby's face. So I'm going to grab a lasso with quite a big feather and grab these areas that are very dark. Okay, so I might remove this area first and just start with this one. Okay, add a curves and raise the exposure just on this, on her skin there. Now you can see that it's gone over a little, so I grab a black brush and I'll just paint that off here. And I've done it again. Okay. Alright. And reduce the opacity down. Okay, and it's lightening her up all the way through now, which is actually quite nice. What I'm not enjoying though is the contrast. So we'll work on that in a minute. And I'll just get rid of this here. Okay. Alright, now I'll reduce the opacity of that down a little, and now I'll do an overall. Okay. Curves. Okay. Now I'm going to just bring the bar across here just to decontrast a little. I wasn't enjoying the contrast of what was happening. So I need a black brush again. Okay. Alright, and contrast and saturation. Okay, much better done in Lightroom. However, just to give you an idea, let's put this in a group. So I've decontrasted her face there. Okay, so that's also added the saturation that we added originally as well. Okay, so I much prefer the way she's looking there now, and I'll just reduce that so it looks a little more natural, because of course her face is in the shadows, so you don't want to take that away completely. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to add a gradient. This time I'm going to add in the colour that's in the photograph. So I want that nice gold, but I'll make it a bit darker because I'm going to make it a vignette. And this one can actually be one of the reds. Okay, and I'm going to make that radial and inverse it. Okay, and just make that soft light, and it'll add a natural vignette in, as you can see. Now I'm actually going to erase that off on the downward so it's natural. Okay, now she has got some red skin tones going on there, so I'm going to do a hue saturation, pull down any other colour than red, grab the eyedropper, click on the skin tones, it'll bring up red too, and I'm just going to grab that across to and drag it to yellow, which actually you'll notice that it's actually done a very nice yellow, but it has taken that autumn feel away from the leaves, but I prefer it on the skin tone. And I might just do a little bit of a lightness just to desaturate a little. Control I to inverse that, and then I am going to just brush that on to their skin. And I've got it as a 33 opacity so that I can work as I go. Just paint gently. Okay, and on her hair there, her hair kind of went very red. Okay, and if I do it just slowly as I go, you can do it progressively so that you're not overdoing it. Okay, and I'll just raise the curves on them a little. Alright, so now that I've got to this point, what I'd like to do is Control Alt E to merge them all, and I'm going to start doing some blur layers. Control J to blur to duplicate the layer, and then I'll put a blur on it. Filter blur, Gaussian blur. And I'll do quite a hefty one, so I'll leave that at 7.0, and I'll mask that. And I'm just going to raise that off. Let's put it 100%. And I'll be sure to get all the areas of which she is. The edges are really important because if you don't erase off the edges, then you'll end up with little blur lines. Now when we zoom in, you're going to see those blur lines. So now that we've erased this off at 100%, I'm going to grab a bigger brush and reduce the opacity and just gently brush off in the middle there. Okay, that is barely noticeable, but what it has done is it's just blurred the edges out a little. Okay, now I got asked about portraiture, so let's cover that. When I use portraiture, I do tend to put it onto. Portraiture is an Imagematic product, and you can get it at imagematic.com. I have talked about it before, but I don't believe in the recent videos. It's a very good product because you can simply, I have it set to default, but you can simply click on the expand mask and you select the areas that you want it to grab. So in this occasion I'd like it to grab a whole lot. Now I have the sharpness raised up as well, and all it does is it actually sharpens as well as blurs, and I also have it on a new layer and create transparency mask. So what it's going to do is actually add the transparency mask so that we can do a before and after, and it's actually quite lovely. It does it really quickly. If you are an editor that does skin retouching, then you're probably horrified by this suggestion, and that's fine. But for someone that does a lot of work, it quickly softens the skin, and you can have it lighten as well as sharpen the skin tones. It does a lot of different things, but this is what I tend to do. Then I'll just grab a brush and I'll erase off on the areas that are important to me, such as the eyes. Okay. But nothing else is really that important to me. And I prefer to keep what it's actually done. It's softened out all those areas there. If you don't like softening, I suggest that you don't keep it. So let's talk about adding some natural light in there. Okay, I'm more than happy to leave this photograph as it is. But how can we enhance it a little more if you wanted to take it further? Let's talk about that now. So let's talk about the way that the light is falling. So firstly, the light is obviously coming, it's not coming from directly from behind. It's coming from directly above and down. It's actually coming from in this direction and down across here. It's coming from there. So what, if I am going to work on light, I'm going to actually work on it in a way that the light does come in that direction. So let's merge all these layers and see if we can't work on that light. Okay, so first of all, there's a number of ways of doing this, but I'm going to work on it very slowly and very gradually. Now the first thing is that this light is coming in from this way. So I'm going to make that fall across very slightly, and I'm going to make it more of a yellow to begin with. Okay, we'll put that on a page and press OK, and then I'm going to reduce the opacity of that layer. So now we already have downward directional light falling on them. But what about the bottom? We need that bottom area to be darker. So again, I'll do a gradient, but this time I'm going to make that a darker gradient, and I'll pick out one of the colors that's already within and make it as dark as I can, and press OK. And again, work on it how it is naturally falling. So it is more over this side, just slightly. And I'll press OK, and let's make that multiply. Okay, so multiply darken. So if we put on the darker, then it already makes it dark straight away. And it naturally falls over the jumper as well, which was something that I was worried about. It seems to have naturally darkened that. So now by doing that, we already have a slight increase in light falling down. So now how do we get it even more directionally falling so if it's natural? We could add in I'm going to select all and add in a gradient again. And this time I'm going to make it very slightly, just very slightly peach. Press OK, make it radial, and press OK, and then drag that over this way a little. Okay. Now this corner is far more, it's actually through here, likely to have that increase of light. And let's work on the bottom again. So we'll do a gradient, and again, just slowly does it. So I prefer, look, even though you can work faster by doing a big bang and doing it quickly, I prefer the very slight increases, because then I can just make sure that I'm doing okay. So then I will reduce the opacity of that so it's exactly as I did last time. Okay, so let's put all of this into a group and have a look at it. And as you can see, it's made the light fall down on them more. I think in a much more natural way too, far more realistic. Now you might not like the way that it's falling on them and made them less contrasty, so what we can do is just make a mask of that and reduce the opacity down a little and just mask that off them. Just a touch, so that we can see them there again. Okay. And I'm going to make a bigger brush, just mask that off a little, and just again ever so slightly. Alright. Okay, so I prefer the way that that's naturally falling now. It's not quite so distinct. Alright. And I'm just going to do a curves in the background there. Now, if you wanted to make this more vintagey at this point, you could simply just raise the curves at the top, down the bottom here, make it go up a bit, and that removes the blacks. So now that I've done that, I don't actually want that effect to be on them so much, so I'm just going to mask that off on the subjects just to bring them back into focus, add some more contrast back into them. And as you can see, I don't mind being a little bit messy because I'm just going to make it obvious on the edges there. Okay. So we did a lot more than you'd actually really need to do. You could have actually stopped at the Lightroom stage really, but I hope that was helpful. So this is before, this is after Lightroom, but before we started any photoshopping. And this is after photoshopping. So I'll see you in the next video.